address the current inflation situation in Papua New Guinea. Dr. Wangi, thank you for joining us.
Malcolm, it's a pleasure to be on the program again.
Firstly, Dr. Wangi, why is inflation bad for the economy?
Inflation is the general increase in the price of goods and services over a period of time. And it is bad for the economy because it reduces the demand for goods and services. It also adds to the cost of living and as well as cost of doing business. When there is inflation in a country, it also discourages more investment in PNG as well as those existing businesses because of the increase in the cost of production. There is a potentially they could not, expand the investment in the country.
What are the forms of inflation?
I think typically there are several forms of inflation, but three common ones. The first one is known as the demand-full inflation. Demand-full inflation is from the demand side of the economy. So it's like when there is increase in government spending, or when there is a reduction in tax, or when there is a reduction in interest rate, there is more investment in the economy. So when there is more investment, that means there is more job, and then there is more income in the pockets of the people. So when people have money in the pockets, the demand for goods and services goes up. And when the demand goes up, the price also increases. So that's called a demand-pull inflation. The second one is known as the cost-push inflation. So the cost-push inflation is from the supply side of the economy. So when there is an increase in the cost of production, what I mean is the inputs like labor, capital, and the price. When that cost is now being affected in the final value of a good or a service. And the cost is now passed on to the consumers in the form of increased price of goods and services. So that's number two. The third one is what we refer to as the imported inflation. Imported inflation is coming from mainly from external sources. So when there's some kind of developments external, and then that affects the price of goods and services abroad. Given that PNG is importer-dependent economy, we actually import that increase in the price of goods and services. We import them, and then the importers, they pass the cost to us, the consumers. It can also happen from our domestic front as well. So when our kina or value of our exchange rate drops, that means importers actually pay for high price of goods and services. So cost is now being factored in the final sales price of a good or a service, and that pushes the price up, and that eventually passed on to the consumers. And those are the three main types of inflation that PNG has, I think, experienced over the years.
Are there specific designated government authorities that monitor inflation in Papua New Guinea?
Yes, in PNG, yes, there are several agencies who does that, the key economic agencies, but the National Statistical Office is the one who actually collects the price of goods and services. They compile it, and then they put it through a system called LESPRO system. It's like a price index system. They get the average and they do all the calculations. But then our central bank, which is the Bank of PNG, also monitors the inflation. So is the Department of Treasury, because of the potential implications inflation have on the economy.
Okay. Now, one of the core tenets of your paper is that monetary and exchange rate policy instruments cannot effectively address current inflation. Fiscal policy tools can, but at a cost to the government. Could you elaborate on that?
I think there are several types of policy instruments that are actually available to address inflation. In PNG, we have three key macroeconomic policies which can at least address the current inflation situation. Number one is known as the monetary policy. Monetary policy involves the adjustment of the interest rate to target the money supply. So that is, the central bank is the custodian of the policy and adjusts the interest rate to control money supply, and then as a means to target inflation as well. So that's called a monetary policy. The second one is called the exchange rate policy. So that's about the management of our exchange rate with the currencies of major trading partners. So how that can influence inflation is when we have a strong exchange rate. That means we are able to manage price fluctuations. So when our kina is strong, that means we are paying less. So inflation is actually, we are controlling inflation in that way. The third one is the major policy that we have is the fiscal policy. Fiscal policies involves the two major tools, the taxation component and the expenditure component, and that's through the Department of Treasury and the use of the tax incentives as a means to support or to provide relief to the price of goods and services.
Thank you, Dr. Wangi. We now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions.
You get big data and big value with Telecom Goodpilla mobile data plans. From only 3 kina, you get 1 gig for 24 hours. And for only 150 kina, you get 130 gigs over a whopping 30 days. And with loads of Goodpilla data plans to choose from, there's a small, medium or large plan to match your budget. Dial *777# to subscribe. Telecom, connecting you anywhere, anytime.
From humble beginnings 30 years ago, Daytech is now the largest communications technology solutions and services provider in PNG. We have intensified our solution and service offering with sound business practices and a strong affiliation with some of the largest technology providers in the world. Daytech does not only strive towards supplying goods with total customer satisfaction, but we innovate and provide value-added services. Daytech, innovative solutions, valued services.
It is by law under Section 18 of the Classification of Publication Censorship Act of 1989 for all commercial advertisements to be submitted to the Office of Censorship for screening, classification and licensing before publishing and broadcasting. Section 46(2) states an application for classification of advertising matter shall A. be in the prescribed form and be lodged with the Chief Censor and accompanied by the prescribed feed. Always remember, censorship starts at home.
Dreaming for more than the life we've known. There is more to what the future holds. You be holy, man, no walk one time. Oh, 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 oh. We dare to believe in incredible things. Oh, 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 oh. With money, plus we're ready.
Are you thirsty for more? Celebrate this independence with Pepsi's new look, same great taste, and lower than low prices. Only 2 kina 20 in stores now. Includes Pepsi, Pepsi Max, 7-Up, Mirinda, Mountain Dew, Gold Spot, and Coca-Cola. Hurry to your nearest store for more.
At Telecom, we're boosting our network. Households will enjoy better connections. Communities will get faster speeds and wider coverage. And business will profit from new towers and a more secure network. Plus, everyone will benefit from onshore storage that brings browsing home. It's all part of our ongoing billion kina nationwide investment. It feels good to be building a faster, stronger network for PNG.
When it comes to being connected, let's get Pacific.
From across the seas and right around our region. Connecting you like never before with the latest in news, politics, sports, and events.
When it matters most, the Pacific will be there, bringing you the latest information and updates.
Because what matters to the Pacific matters to us.
The Pacific, 7:30 p.m. tonight, right here on your number one to watch, MTV.
Welcome back to In Focus. Now, Dr. Wangi, given that PNG is an import-dependent economy, to what extent is PNG vulnerable to global price forces or shocks?
Yes, given of the events, global events that we have seen in the recent years, that includes the outbreak of the coronavirus epidemic, that also directly affects the supply component, and that the demand is still there. So as a result of that, the price of most goods and services have gone up. And as an importing country, we have imported most of the goods in high prices, so that also affected us. And then followed on that is the current war in Ukraine and Russia. Russia being the top 5 oil producing country, the war directly affects the supply of oil through the trade restrictions as well as the direct destruction of the oil producing facilities. So as a result of that, the price of oil has gone up because supply has been affected, demand is still there. So as a result, the price of oil has gone up. And that increase in the price is now being passed on in the form of manufacturing of a good or service, and as well as in the transportation of final goods and services to importing countries. And that price is now being paid by the importers. And the importers, they actually pass the price on to the consumers. And as a result of that, in the recent years, we have seen an increase in the price of goods and services domestically here in PNG since the year 2020.
What would you feel are best reforms the government can take to shield itself against such global price shocks?
I think there could be some potential reforms around there using some of the macroeconomic tools that we have. And one of that, it can be done through the exchange rate policy, because all the imports that are coming into the country, they're all subject to exchange rate movements. So one of that is we have to stabilize or by way of some interventions and then try to control the price through the exchange rate. But unfortunate thing is, as I speak, our exchange rate policy is currently undergoing the reform through the IMF loan condition. So that policy is no longer available up until 2026. As a result of that, PNG is very much highly vulnerable to all the external price shocks.
It's a good segue into our next question, and it's that with the International Monetary Fund exchange rate reform, how is the Bank of Papua New Guinea implementing the prescribed reforms?
Well, the reform is, as I've mentioned earlier, it's one of the conditions of the loan. So the reform is it's on one of the existing regime. So the current exchange rate regime that central bank implements since 2014 is what we refer to as the crawl-like regime. Crawl-like means there is very limited movements within the band for the kina to move. But since the beginning of this year under the IMF loan program, that band or that gap is now being widened. So instead of being a 75 basis point, currently it's trading at 100 basis point. So that means the kina has more room to move within the trading band or trading limit. So that limit is 100% basis point. But then the demand for kina is actually low in the market. So as a result of that, we expect the kina to depreciate. And that's what we have seen in the recent months. So since January of this year, since then of this year through the implementation of the reform, the kina has been depreciated, I think, by almost 4% up until the end of August. So that's because of that factor.
Now, based on the IMF's exchange rate reform, you've noted a continuous depreciation of the PNG kina. What will this entail for PNG imports?
Well, as I have also stated earlier, that the depreciation of the kina, especially against the US dollar, that implies that our imports are becoming expensive. So that means importers need more kina to pay for imports. So then when they sell them here in PNG, they actually try to factor the increase in the cost of imports. So by way of increasing the price of goods and services. So that's the kind of inflation that we are currently going through. So one of the factors that contributing to current inflation, it is the exchange rate reform. That's from our domestic end. The other two are external. That's, as I said, it's the war in Ukraine as well as the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Wangi.
Thank you.
We now go for a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions.
For over 35 years of being the largest technology solutions and services provider in PNG, Lenovo is one of the world's leading personal technology companies, producing innovative PCs and laptops for the best experience for its users. Daytech is Gold Partner of Lenovo and is one of the largest retail vendors for Lenovo laptops and PCs. Daytech's technical expertise have integrated PNG with the rest of the world.
Enjoy more talk, more text, and more time online with Telecom More Bundles. Choose from 8 plans ranging from 3 kina with 600 megabytes of data all the way up to 75 kina, loaded with a massive 35 gig. Best of all, each plan comes with an unlimited on-network call minutes plus on-net and off-net talk and text. That's way more time to chat with family and friends. Telecom More Bundles. Top up now.
Start your day the smart way with the new Smart Start Breakfast Biscuit. Whether you are busy or on a budget, Smart Start Breakfast Biscuits gives you a healthy and affordable breakfast to set you up for school or play. Smart Start Breakfast Biscuits are fortified with essential vitamins for body or brain health. They contain vitamin A for healthy growth and development, vitamin B6 for healthy metabolism, immune system and brain development, and vitamin B12 for nerve and cell health. Proudly made by Paradise Foods.
Dude, you're looking ice cold.
You look ice cold, bro.
Guys, somebody's coming. Somebody's coming.
Let's do it.
There comes a day
when I'll be the one
you dream.
It's gonna
be way.
Dude, are you crying?
Dear son, you ask me how I live such a good life. Yes, I've had some good luck, like the day I met your mother. But it wasn't always that way. I've made some good choices too, like working hard and keeping my super with NASFAN. They looked after it for me, which meant I could concentrate on looking after my family. Living each day, knowing that when the time came, I'd be ready for tomorrow. Love, Dad.
At Telecom, we're boosting our network. Households will enjoy better connections, and business will profit from new towers and a more secure network. It feels good to be building a faster, stronger network for PNG.
MTV presents Vocal Fusion Season 11 2024, the Grand Final, live this Sunday at the Cosmopolitan. Stay tuned to your number one to watch, MTV.
Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. Now, Dr. Wangi, what specific policy options does this paper recommend to address inflation?
Well, with the current inflation, the important thing is we have to understand the type of inflation and the source of inflation. So once we get to understand that, then we are able to apply the appropriate policy response or specific policy responses. So the current source of inflation, most of that is related to the imports. There could be other sources, but they may have very limited influence on the current inflation numbers. But most of that is coming through the imports. So now we understand that the current inflation is imported inflation. So then we have to think about which are the appropriate policies that we're going to apply as far as the monetary policy or the exchange rate or even the fiscal policy are concerned. So monetary policy, it is not appropriate when we have demand, when there is imported inflation. Monetary policy is not appropriate to apply. Exchange rate policy, it is one of the appropriate policies. But unfortunately, that policy is tied to the IMF loan condition, and it's no longer free to address the current inflation situation. So the only options that are available, or the only option that is available, it is the fiscal policy. So looking especially at the fiscal policy, the options, there could be temporary options. They will not bring any long-lasting solution to the current inflation that we are facing. Why? It's because the source is mainly currently it's to do with the war in Ukraine, and as well as our domestic exchange rate reform. So the current inflation is likely to continue for an indefinite period. But there are some options where we need to explore, where it can give a temporary relief, especially through the tax measures. So some of them that I have listed or that I have identified in the paper, the first one is provide tax relief measures on the imports. So any import that is coming through PNG, they're all subject to like some kind of fees and charges through our customs. So those fees and charges that need to be relooked at, especially for consumable items, because the process itself is costly. When we're talking about tax is a cost to the government. So here I'm just suggesting that specific consumable items like rice or tin fish, noodles, toilet papers, any basic items that individuals need on a daily basis for a living. So those are the items that our customs here in PNG can look into and trying to reduce the charges on those so that can also reduce the price of those items on the shelves in our shops. That's number one. Secondly, is the other policy option that the government could consider is to provide, not to provide, but to reduce goods and services tax, GST. So GST is implemented at the point of sales. So if you go to the shop, on a receipt, you will always see GST, 10%. So that is the one that we, the consumers, we also pay for that. So it's currently 10%, but potential room for the government is can reduce, especially on specific consumable items again. So goods that people really need on a daily basis to live. So basically about 10 or 7 items, and then try and cut the GST. Or if it means to give a total exemption, it's okay as well. But it will come at a cost to the government. The other policy option there is to reintroduce subsidy. So subsidy is like a price support scheme. So where the government will pay part of the price and the consumers will have to pay part of the price as well. So just like back in 2022 June, up until I think last year June, the government stepped in by paying a portion of the price for fuel. So that's what we call a fuel subsidy. But the unfortunate thing about this is that how to maintain it over time, because it's a very costly exercise for the government to afford. But that option is also available. So that's I have highlighted in the paper as well. The other one is option is it may not be inclusive, but to reduce the personal and income tax. So because most of the inflation is centered mainly around the urban areas, even in the rural areas, but in the rural areas there is a food freely available, but in the urban areas everything we are buying, and there is opportunity where there is for the government to at least reduce the personal income tax, both in the public and the private sector, so that in that way it puts more money back into the pockets, so people at least have some extra money to spend. So these are some of the policy options that I have highlighted there in the paper, and these policy options, they actually come at a cost to the government. So it is up to the government to at least decide on adopting one or two. It really depends on the government because it's a cost to the government, but I'm actually highlighting them for the government to consider. But there is also one more that I have highlighted in the paper is for long-term purpose, for long-term. It's like 5-10 year kind of, that's the import substitution. Because most of the goods and services that we are consuming in this country, we are actually importing them from abroad, one way or the other. So as far as the Marape government's policy is concerned, they're looking into downstream, especially in the agriculture, especially in the primary sector. So this policy needs to give some more attention, and we have to produce some of our goods and services here in PNG, and then we consume ourselves, and the surplus we must export to bring other things like foreign reserves and so on. But at the same time, this will also cut out some of the high import prices as well.
Dr. Thomas Wangi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your time.
Well, viewers, that concludes this episode of In Focus. Do join us again next week, Monday, on our regular time slot of 7 p.m. Till then, bye for now.
This program was proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.
At Telecom, we're boosting our network. Households will enjoy better connections. Communities will get faster speeds and wider coverage. And business will profit from new towers